Allow me to introduce myself.
I am the last sane sports fan.
I am a genius by trade.
Hello everyone and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. It's time for a special edition, a review of The Force Awakens, the newest installment in the Star Wars franchise, with the help of my little friends Kylo Ren and Kylo Ren Pop. So he was the new villain in the new Star Wars movie, and I have to say he did an excellent job. I think it's a great new villain to carry on the franchise because it had enough of that feel of menace that Darth Vader brought you, mixing in some new flavors and everything. But let's get right into it as we are going to review the entire film. One of the main criticisms, obviously those of you who have seen the film, Han Solo dies. A lot of people have been saying it happened too quick, it didn't have the emotional resonance that it should have. Personally, I disagree with that. There's been a lot of people saying that they wanted to see a scene between Han and Kylo Ren earlier in the film, and that would have helped out the scene to where Han dies, to give it more of that emotional punch. I get that from a single movie aspect, but I guess the way my mind works is I can kind of fill in the gaps for myself. So I can kind of think of all the things that had to have happened over a certain time frame that would have led to that point. And to the point to where Kylo Ren basically, even though it's telegraphed, he's sitting there saying, it's like, I know what I have to do. And a lot of us, whether we fooled ourselves into hoping that he would go to the light side, even for a brief moment, or knew what was coming, you still kind of understood. It's like, oh, he's saying that to completely go to one side or the other, I either have to save you or I have to kill you to go to the dark side or the light side, respectively. But it still had that emotional punch for me. But I do agree with the fact that the emotion for me came from the fact that it's like you're never going to see Han Solo again, at least in a present time scene. If they go in flashbacks, that's a whole different matter. But you're never going to see him again with Leia, with Luke, unless it's a flashback again. So it made me cry a little bit with that understanding. And I found it to be incredibly emotional, the fact that Han Solo is basically forgiving his son by touching his face, that he hasn't seen his son for so long, and he just, much the same way as Luke and Darth Vader wanted to look on each other with their own eyes, Han wanted to see Kylo Ren without the mask and touch his face one last time before everything ended, and he got to do that. And to me, I thought that was an incredibly powerful scene. I'm not going to say that people who did not agree with that are wrong, but to me, that's how I personally reacted to that scene. And I thought it was well done for what they had available, because people want to say, oh, well, you know that it's set up that way, and they should have had that extra scene in there. But my argument against that is the fact that the screaming of Ben with that whole chasm in front of them, revealing the character's name, to me it fits exactly where it is. And you're not going to have him screaming at Kylo Ren to say that even though that we already know that Kylo Ren is Han Solo's son, you don't know the name. So to me that scene right there fits right where it's at. And to put it earlier in the movie kind of twists things and to me takes away from the power of that, because that was a little bit shocking, the fact that he would just scream out Ben and just, oh wow, Ben Solo, that's the guy's name. And again, that's just how I reacted to it. Everybody is partial to their own opinion. The other big complaint from this film is Kylo Ren is too emotional. Some compared him too much to Spider-Man's 3 character, to where he was a bit emo. Again, if that's your opinion, I'm not going to sit here and try to change it, because I don't have enough information based on what you feel is the character should have been to necessarily try to assuage that. But I do feel that the character was well set up, because the way that I think about it, again, is Kylo Ren was probably begun to train by Luke from a fairly young age. Maybe they waited a little bit too long. You don't know what that might have been. That's another thing that could be clarified in the future about the past. But Kylo Ren probably left Luke's side when he was in his early to mid to even possibly late teens, given the fact that you have to figure if Kylo Ren is roughly 25 to 30, then there's probably a 15 to 10 year gap in there to where he would have left his master when he was a teenager. Well, those are very important years to a youth. So if your emotional state is not set very well, and then you go over to the dark side to where they preach, yes, use your hate, use your emotion, then you're going to come off as a little bit emo, because that's the way. He's never known any differently, except for the fact that he has completely rejected the Jedi, so all of that is out the window. You can't have any peace, you can't have any calmness. You're supposed to embrace all of those feelings. And if you have only known a certain way of acting from a very young age, then that's kind of the way that you're going to act. And the way that I also liked Adam Driver's performance is, to me, that was my one gripe about the prequels, is I didn't enjoy the way that Hayden Christensen was told or just ended up playing Anakin Skywalker. I think if Anakin Skywalker would have acted the way that Kylo Ren does throughout the film, it would have been a lot more palatable to fans out there, because it would have been more understandable, it would have been a little bit more believable, it would have been a little less wooden. So I thought Kylo Ren and Adam Driver, the actor who played him, was an excellent choice, the way that they portrayed it all, given the way that I understood the setup between it all. But again, if you didn't agree with that, that's your own choice, because we all come into it wanting different things. I thought Adam Driver did an excellent job with Kylo Ren, and I'm anticipating great things from that character going forward. Another thing a lot of people claim about is, why do untrained people such as Finn and Rey pose a threat to Kylo Ren in a lightsaber duel? Well, there's a lot of things that go into that. Number one, Finn was a stormtrooper, so he was trained in combat. And some of this is a little bit of a stretch, because the lightsaber is a different kind of weapon. You can't just pick up a sword, having been trained as a policeman, and expect to hold your own against a talented fencer. But having said that, you still do have a certain knowledge of self-defense, of how to attack a person's weak points, to where you're going to be able to defend yourself. And I kind of think that that's what Finn was doing. And also, when Kylo Ren was taking on Finn, Kylo Ren was in an emotional state. He was injured. He had taken a blaster bolt from Chewie earlier in the film. He was bleeding all over the place. So he wasn't necessarily in his top peak physical condition. And the same can be said when he faces Rey, but when he's facing Rey, he's also not looking to destroy her. He wants her to become his apprentice. And John Campea also brought up something that I hadn't considered, and a lot of people have brought it up before, that Rey might have been using the Force on Kylo Ren to kind of push him back and throw him off his game. So there's a lot of reasons that go into that, but you also have to take into the fact that Kylo Ren was injured. Rey may have been trained as a youth and just had her mind wiped. That's a whole different subject as well. And it was just a scene. I thought they did a very good job of putting the fight in there without saying that Kylo Ren should have absolutely destroyed these people, because there were enough pieces in there to really kind of explain why they held their own, to where it didn't take me out of the film. One of the other things that was talked about in there, I talked a little bit about Carrie Fisher. That was really where the wooden acting kind of came in for me. She didn't necessarily play off of Han the way that I would have liked, but you can almost put that aside. But when Han dies, she's not very emotional. But you can kind of put that to the side, because she is the general. She's supposed to kind of keep it together. She's not going to be screaming out there in emotion, all distraught, while everything around her is supposed to be calm, and she's supposed to be the leading presence within that. So again, you can kind of forgive that a little bit, but again, that was kind of one of my nitpicky things along with the film. Is Snoke Plagueis was another thing that is brought up by this film. I still don't know. When I first saw the film, I was like, okay, well, it's definitely not Plagueis. Darth Plagueis, because he's not a moon or a Mun or however you say that. It's M-U-U-N. Look up the character from the banking clan. They were all moons. And but now I've come to realize that now him being a moon is not canon. It is not official. So therefore it still could be Darth Plagueis, and that would still be interesting. And I'm kind of glad in hindsight that they didn't tell us right off the bat. But during the film it was kind of disappointing that you don't get to see him. He's only in hologram form, and also that you don't necessarily know exactly who he is yet. But as we mentioned, you don't really find out who the Emperor is until Return of the Jedi, even though you see him briefly in Empire Strikes Back. So all these questions will kind of be answered as we go along. A couple more things I wanted to touch on before we wrap things up. The big question right out there is, who is Rey? Who is she related to, if anybody? I don't want to spend too much time on that because honestly I'm just going to say I don't know. There's compelling arguments to be made that she is Luke Skywalker's daughter. There was a scene to where Kylo Ren is looking into her mind and he says, I see an ocean, I see an island, and all that. So obviously she has some sort of sense of where Luke's at, and she has for a long time, because he talks about how lonely she is and how she can't sleep, but every night she dreams about this island in the middle of an ocean. So she has some sort of feeling as to where Luke is. Why that would be if she's not related, I don't know. But there's compelling arguments as to why she's not related. I don't like the whole idea of this Force mind wipe. I mean, if that's what they go with, I'm not going to complain about it too much. But right off the bat, she says, oh, I thought Luke Skywalker was a myth. So she apparently doesn't have any clue that Luke Skywalker really existed, let alone would be her father. I don't agree with this whole idea of, shrinking the universe, expanding the universe. It's a story about certain characters that influence other characters, and this idea that, if you make everybody related, it somehow shrinks the universe. I don't like that, because it's just a story about certain people within the universe. And yes, it is a tiny bit far-fetched to think that these one little group, this one little family, and their extended relations have that much influence over everything that goes on in the galaxy. Yes, that's a little bit far-fetched, but again, it's just the way that this story is constructed. To say that what happens in King Arthur's court has an effect over the entire land of England, that's a little bit far-fetched, but sometimes that's the way things happen with people who are in certain circumstances, certain rings of power, and what have you. The one thing I will say about Rey, there's no way that she is a Kenobi. Because the argument behind that would be that, Obi-Wan Kenobi had a daughter or a son or whatever, had a child with Duchess Satine of Mandalore, who nobody knows who they are. If you haven't watched the Clone Wars, you don't know who Duchess Satine is. So then you have to explain who she is. And granted, you could do this with a little bit of exposition, a throwaway line here or there. Perhaps even a Force ghost of Obi-Wan coming back and explaining it all. But then you have to explain, who the parents were and why they left their child on Jakku. And that is still the big question to me of who Rey is that needs to be answered, is why whoever her parents were left her with that junk dealer. You would think they could find a situation that was a little bit better suited to actually somebody raising their daughter, as opposed to just throwing her out there to the wolves and, this guy is going to give her a portion here or two if she brings him some stuff. That part has to be explained, but to me, there's absolutely no way that she is a Kenobi, because to me that is just going too far into, now we're really delving into the deep stuff to where your average person is not going to know who those people are. And while you don't always have to understand the churnings of family soap operas in terms of that, I just think that that's a little bit too much of a stretch to say that she's related to Obi-Wan Kenobi somehow. Last thing I wanted to touch on before I go, this constant complaint that the film is too much like A New Hope. It is, but I don't agree with the whole term that it's a soft reboot, despite the fact that it does kind of fit the overall definition. I don't know. The people who say that it is, that's their opinion, and if that's why they didn't like the movie, that's why they didn't like the movie. I personally enjoyed the movie, and to me it was different enough to where I didn't necessarily think that it was just a complete mirror image of A New Hope. And when you think about it, there's only so many news stories that you can tell. Everybody's complaining about Starkiller Base being too similar to the Death Star. But when you have to put entire star systems in danger, how are you going to do that? Yes, you could all of a sudden construct this massive fleet, but then all of a sudden you have to explain how the Resistance is going to be able to take that down. When you have one massive local base, it's easier to comprehend being able to take that down as opposed to this gigantic fleet that's strewn about the universe, or maybe even concentrated at this one planet, but you don't have the amount of ships that are going to be able to take that down. So, yes, it was a bit of a rehash, but to me it wasn't enough to say that, okay, well, this was like the remake of Psycho, to where it was just every single scene was exactly the same. You had new characters, you had new lines, you had new situations, you had a new villain. There were callbacks to the originals, but there were callbacks to Empire Strikes Back. There were callbacks to Return of the Jedi. To me, it was kind of, if you want to call it a ripoff, it was a ripoff of the entire original trilogy, not necessarily just A New Hope. But again, that is my take on it, and if you don't think that it was a good film because it took too much from Episode 4, then there's really nobody that's going to change your opinion on that. I didn't necessarily agree with that. Again, there's only so many news stories that you can have out there. There's only so many ways that you can put a different take on it without it being exactly the same as something else. I mean, you look at popular culture just within adult cartoons. Family Guy is very popular, but it's technically a ripoff of The Simpsons. The Simpsons are very original, but a lot of their stuff is kind of a ripoff of the Flintstones. The Flintstones were a ripoff of sitcoms of the time. So there's really nothing that is wholly and truly original, because there's always been some idea that is out there that has been populated throughout culture, whether you want to go all the way back to the tales of King Arthur. A lot of these heroes' tales are basically taken off of that, and that was taken off of other cultures. So there isn't anything that's completely and truly 100% original. So a lot of people just need to kind of sit back and enjoy the ride, as opposed to thinking, oh, well, it's too much like this, it's too much like that, it wasn't what I expected here, it wasn't what I wanted there. Because you have to realize, with the exception of children, you're not going to love anything for 30 plus years, or however long you've loved the original trilogy, and all of a sudden something new come along and it truly be able to live up to that expectation. As I said, family, children, grandchildren, those are the exceptions. But there are very few things, because you know something so well, you know the ins and outs of it, every little bit and piece, so well with the original trilogy, that this new film isn't going to be able to stand up to that kind of scrutinization. But it is a good film in and of itself. My one gripe was I do worry that they're going to basically kind of Lord of the Rings this thing, and Episode 8 is going to pick up immediately after. I don't necessarily want it to do that, but I also understand you don't necessarily want to just gloss over all of Rey and Kylo Ren's training. But I also don't necessarily want to pick up right from that ending scene. I just would like there to be a little bit of a gap. But we'll have to wait and see. Luckily, we only have to wait about a year and a half, and we've got Rogue One, the spin-off film, coming in December as well. That's only a year away. And then we've got Episode 8 almost immediately right after that. So it's a great time to be a Star Wars fan. I want to thank you if you watch this video, because it's been great. The Star Wars community coming together, because a lot of us throughout our lives at different points in time have felt picked on, have felt less than what we should because of the fact that we love a certain set of films, and that's not the way that society should be. Unfortunately, sometimes it is. But the fact that everybody, whether you're the most popular movie star in the world or just some lowly person doing things, just watching the movie by yourself, that everybody has been able to come together and share their love for these films has really been very uplifting, whether it was the Force for Daniel kind of thing, or just everybody kind of talking and respectfully showing their opinions. It's been nice to see the way that that has come together. So that is the view from the Midwest, the spoiler review of The Force Awakens. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Comment, rate, and subscribe, and I might keep these entertainment videos coming along as well as the sports ones that I normally do. But until the next time, I'll see you then.